friends. Welcome to episode 107 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 14th year, I found myself asking the question, where is the podcast that will help me do my job? I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I'd like to extend a very special welcome this week to listeners Savannah in Arizona, Shannon in Connecticut, Catherine in Maryland, Lisa in New Jersey, and Julie in New Zealand. I'd also like to say hello to Christy and all the school librarians in Charleston County, South Carolina. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback, episode suggestions, either on Facebook, my Twitter, where you can find me at LMS_United, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now for our episode, Fighting Fake News, and my conversation with Lucas Maxwell. Lucas Maxwell, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Amy. I really appreciate it.
You know, listeners will want to know, could you describe for us your current library? Where are you? The grades you teach? What might I see if I saw you at work today, which I won't because you're in lockdown?
We're in lockdown, but on a pre-COVID day, my school is called Glenthorne High School, and it's located in Sutton, which is a borough of London. But so it's in the south, I would say call it outskirts of London. But if you got on a train, 10, 15 minutes, you could be near the center. So it's pretty close. And it's, for me, a large school coming from where I'm from. It's a high school, what they call high school here. So in the UK, they don't really, as far as I know, they don't really have junior high or middle grades, middle school. So it serves ages 11 to 19, which they all call high school here. One large building, around 1,700 students. And the library is it's fairly new. It's about 3 or 4 years old now. I should know this, but it houses 30 computers. We've got about 8,000 books, and it's myself, and I'm very lucky to have a colleague, full-time library colleague, and together we try to do the best we can to serve every year group. And so year 7, which is age 11, 8 and 9 will come in every 2 weeks for a library lesson, which I get to lead. I'm very grateful to do that. And of course, we're doing, promoting reading for pleasure, bringing authors in, doing all sorts of different things, but also teaching responsible researching and, of course, fighting fake news. And I also do something called EPQ, which is Extended Project Qualification. And it's really teaching older students, so like year 12, so 17-year-olds, 16, 17-year-olds, how to research responsibly, how to write a dissertation, an essay. And I do I kind of like, it's one of those things which librarians can sympathize with or empathize with, kind of a jack of all trades, do many, many different things. I get to go into different classrooms and teach, context lessons, all sorts of things. I like to go into, for instance, I think I'm rambling, sorry, but if maybe a dance teacher will say, could you come in and give us context? We have to do a dance on a specific topic, and I can do that. I of course am not dancing. I don't want to break their eyeballs, but it's more of providing, like, here's what this is about. Here are the main themes of this topic, whether it's civil rights, which they've done them on, funnel, kind of an oddball one for me, which was like the Chilean revolution, the uprising in that country, which I had to kind of research all sorts of things. Did one last year on Gulliver's Travels, which is more up my alley. But anyway, so I try to do as much as I can, and but it's a lot of fun. It's as you know, it's different every day, and it's really cool to be with the kids. So, yeah.
Well, I love what you just said. In last week's episode, when I was talking to Tiki about pro advocacy, we talked about our sort of elevator pitch. What do you do for your building? And my elevator pitch was support everyone. And it sounds like you do too. Like whatever you do, it involves helping that person do their job more effectively, helping your students become better at researching. I am very aware that there are universities when those first-year students come, they do not have adequate research skills. And I know that anything we can do to support our graduating students who are going to university to sharpen their research skills beyond a Google search, God forbid, is, and using databases and those kinds of things, we're only giving them, our students, the support that they need once they leave our fine institutions. I love the jack of all trades. Actually, that's an episode next month. So you've sort of hit the nail on the head that we do oftentimes find ourselves just whatever it is, that's where we're going to be. So that's fantastic. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention that you were awarded the UK School Librarian of the Year for 2017. So I'm really curious if you could share with listeners what it is about you and your library program that caught the eye of those on the award committee.
I always wonder how long I can milk that. It's 3 going on 4 years now. But anyway, yes, I really appreciate that. What caught the eye? So it was kind of it was 2 students who nominated me behind my back, and I'll never forgive them. But it was really sweet of them. And of course, the head teacher / principal, he signed off on it and everything. But what did they? So it was quite a lengthy process. I had to submit 9 or 10 pages of evidence that I was the actual librarian who was doing things. And I submitted everything we do in the library lessons, and a lot of it actually on research. I had been doing a big thing then on conspiracy theories, which I only really did that one because I was pretty new, I guess. And I'd been there couple years, but I was just something I was interested in as when I was that age, UFOs, Bigfoot, when I was 11 and all that weird stuff, and Ripley's Believe It or Not stuff and all that. And I had done let's research this responsibly and find out what is accurate regarding these. Because as you get older, you realize that the Bigfoot shows and everything are kind of as much as I enjoyed them, they're quite hokey and maybe probably a bit phony. Sorry, everyone. But anyway, so I did a whole thing on that, and I did a whole thing on using technology. So that was the 2 things that they picked up on: research and technology. And really, technology. It was just things that, again, I thought was fun and cool, like using Skype to get our students who were older to read picture books to kids in Louisiana who were in kindergarten. And our kids loved it because, they loved it because they get to see kids in uniforms, thinking it's some sort of heavy duty private school, which every school here wears uniforms. So it was really fun. And then doing things like mystery Skypes, which are one of my favorite things, with our geography classes where you Skype with another class and you have to guess where in the world they are. And again, always with the United States, because it just creates these really cool conversations. So that's, I think, what caught their eye. I remember them saying those things, and that was the kind of the evidence that I submitted. Then they did that, and then they came to visit, and they stayed the whole day. So they watched me do a couple lessons, and I had been luckily running a series of, again, Skypes at the time, which I still do, called the Professional Skype series, where I get professionals from all over the place to Skype in and talk to our older students who are on the verge of going to college or university. Because when I was that age, I viewed work, jobs, careers, very black and white. Like, you took this at school, therefore you're going to do this. And it was great to get the guy on to Skype with our students, who ended up being the man who designed all the new fonts on the London Underground system, all the tube system on there with all his graphic design tools, and talk about how he had no clue when he was in high school that he would ever get into graphic design. And a makeup artist who does zombie makeup for films and TV. And also we had the CSI type person, one of the first people who was called when a corpse found, which is morbid, but they found it, of course, absolutely fascinating. And then I got to the idea, like, well, I'm going to ask them to tell me what careers they wanted to investigate, and it kind of like snowballed. So they got to see that, the assessors for the award, and that was a lot of fun. And they watched me do a couple of library lessons where I was, again, doing fake news and things like that. So I think it was a mixture of those things.
Well, I think it's incredibly deserving, and there are a couple of things I want to connect with. First of all, using conspiracy theories to grab your students' attention, isn't it fair that if we teach students to be skeptical of conspiracy theories, which, we might find, I want to use air quotes, harmless, like your abominable snowman or Bigfoot. I mean, isn't our hope ultimately that we are raising adults who are also skeptical of conspiracy theories? And I'm thinking more about our students who are in the United States right now, where there are more than a few conspiracy theories being flown around, social media, because people are not discerning users of the information they're encountering on social media. And
yes.
I think it's not that sort of leap from teaching your students about conspiracy theories in the classroom setting or a library setting, and then having those same young adults being exposed to misinformation on social media and wherever they're getting the information that they are, having that sense of skepticism when they are consuming this information, and so that they can make informed decisions about what they're going to do next. Are they going to be pushing these kinds of, are they going to perpetuate the misinformation? Because I think that right now, that is sadly, we are sort of working through the consequences of what happens when conspiracy theories are, promoted and they perpetuate and ricochet all over social media. So that's one really important connection I want to make. Also, friends, what I recommend is that if any of you are interested in utilizing Skype in the library, Jennifer Lewis in the past spring gave a fantastic episode number 74, on Skype in the library, and she really will walk you through all those different steps. So I just wanted to throw that in there too. Lucas, I want to ask you, you're a podcast creator. And friends, I've included a link to a recent episode that, Lucas recorded with his students. And, Lucas, I'm fascinated because your approach and your motivation for podcasting is like radically different from my own.
How so?
Well, could you tell listeners a little bit about the podcast that you create with your students, and really what was the motivation for doing this? Because I think that there are listeners who have thought about perhaps hosting a podcast in their libraries. And friends, I think this is a great opportunity to learn a little bit from somebody who's been doing this for quite a while. You're on episode 64 or episode 65?
Something like that. Yeah, 65 or so now. Yeah, and we've got a lot. Now that we're in this lockdown, I've got a lot lined up, which is amazing. I just need to schedule it, which is always the thing. But thank you for that. So how it happened, I'll try to go as quick as I can. So we have these amazing student library assistants. So we have around 10 of them. And I've been really fortunate that when they come in to the library to be an assistant, maybe 11, 12 years old, a lot of them stick around until they're 17, 18, which is really cool. It does create an issue for the new ones who want to do it. And I've got kids who don't want to leave, but that's a good problem to have. But so anyway, we were lucky. There was a certain year we were the year that I did win that award. It did kind of result in a lot of authors coming to visit, and one of the student library assistants said. We won this. We won a free author visit from a guy named Chris Riddell, who in the UK is known as this. He's this really amazing illustrator. He works with Neil Gaiman a lot, and anyway, he's a really author illustrator, really amazing guy. And one of the student library assistants said, "You should create a school YouTube channel." And, show him talking to the students live. And I was like, that's a cool idea. And I said, I don't know if they'll allow that, because of, showing kids' faces, or if he will allow it, and blah, 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 because it kind of like gives away the magic, whatever. And then one of the other ones, we were just kind of like sitting around talking. And one of the other ones said, well, why don't we just interview him when he comes? And I was like, that's a cool idea. And I was like, how do we? And I was a fan of podcasts, but I didn't really know anything about it. And then this is one of those things where things just seem to fall into place. I got this, it's one of those emails you get where you almost delete, because it's one of these ones where it's just from you almost automatically delete just because you've got this pile of emails. You know what I mean? You see something, it's like, but it was this email about this grant that you could win £500. And I was like, oh, what's this? And I just started reading it. And there was no rule really. The only rule to it was, the idea had to come from a student at your school, but it was for a school library, and it could be spent on anything. So I said, why don't you guys put together an idea for this YouTube interview thing? And one of them said, well, a podcast. We can do a podcast. And it was her idea. I gave her full credit. So she's left the school now because she's graduated. So Hanya, if you're listening, I'll send you this. Hanya and Aqua, I'll give you guys full credit really for this podcast. Okay. So we wrote it up, submitted it, and I didn't think anything of it. And the guy hadn't visited yet. This was coming. It was like they promised it the next kind of school year or something, or it got delayed. I can't remember. But anyway, I get this letter in the mail. We won. We won the grant. So then I had to go to the music department and say, how do I spend £500 on podcasting equipment? Because I had no clue. I don't really consider myself a techie guy. I've just learned by just bashing my head against the wall. So the very nice music tech gentleman sat down. He hand wrote this list. He had it all in his head. He goes, this is what you need. Bang, bang, bang. And he was dead on with the prices almost. And I got an H6 recorder, really cool headphones, nice mics, stands, everything. So all this equipment came, and I had these two students and plus this little other group of students who were all instantly interested. And we set it up, and I just played around with it. And I got one of the other music techs came in and helped me with it. And Chris Riddell came, and I said, he just showed up because he's one of those guys. It's just hard to get email. I don't know his email or anything like that. He's quite a well-known author here, and I could talk to his publicist and stuff like that. But I don't know what happened, but I just didn't ask him in advance, which was horrible kind of etiquette. But he showed up, and he was very friendly, and everyone was very nice. And I said, hey, do you want to be interviewed by our students after you're done? He goes, of course, yeah. So we did it, and that was our first episode. And I said, we've got something here. This is really cool. So then I said we had another library assistant who's now our main interviewer. I said, do you know how to play an instrument? Because I'm kind of disconnected from a lot of their other subjects. Because I can play, blah, blah. And then the other one perked up and said, I can play this. So I had 4 of them in booked the music studio out, and they recorded a little intro and outro. So it's all student based. And then they went into the studio and did the little welcome to Booklings chat. And Booklings is their creation as well. So years before that, I was Skyping with an author, and the author emailed me at the last minute, and I had a much smaller library space, and it was in what's now the staff room, and it was filled with kids. And the author's just not there, just not coming on Skype. And I think it's one of those things where you just start to get the flop sweat and you got to see your kids and there's boiling hot in the room, which I can't even imagine doing now, which is so crazy. But anyway, she emailed me and said, I can't get my Skype to work. I'm so sorry. And I just was being honest. I said, look, guys, might not happen today. I'm sorry. I've got like 120 kids in this cram space. And one of them who was in our book club, who ended up being a library assistant, just said, why don't we just chat with her on Twitter? And that same girl had called the book club. She said she wanted the book club to be called Booklings. She was a library assistant. And so Booklings chat was born out of a Twitter chat with an author. And we would do monthly Twitter chats with authors at lunchtime with like 30 kids, one at a time, like approaching the library, the computer, using the library account with me standing there asking a question with the hashtag Booklings chat. And they would respond. And then when it came time to say, what do we call this podcast? That library assistant was, of course, saying it has to be Booklinks chat. So it's just these weird kind of series of things that happened. And I'm really happy that it's all really student made. I've just been kind of the guy that has been just there to get, here's the space, here's the stuff, let's do it. So there have been a few with me interviewing authors, but that was during the first lockdown and I couldn't get the students. I just was scheduling wise, and there was that was a different issue. But yeah, I mean, it's just been this kind of like weird accident that I'm really proud of them, and I love it that I've got new students every year wanting to do it. So yeah.
Well, and you mentioned something I've quite honestly not explored on this podcast yet, but this idea that you are supervising your students using social media in a way that is not only responsible, but you're modeling a way that you can communicate with, in this case, authors. And we've talked about how do we show students the way to communicate using social media in a way that is appropriate and it's not offensive. And, in this case also, they're communicating with a respected author, yes, not their friend from school. So there is a different protocol, decorum, and you want to make sure that the students are communicating effectively, albeit in 140 characters or 220,
yeah.
But, I think that's fascinating to give the kids the opportunity to use social media in a way that is focused and again, very much in a I want to call it a controlled environment, but in a supervised environment.
No, it's definitely supervised. Yeah. I mean, and that's the cool thing about school libraries. Is that it's their space. And if you kind of mold, that's why we've had like open mics. We used to have open mics and, or who, the stuff that the programs that we've had in there, that's been really lucky for me is you can kind of like, I've been given the freedom to try these different weird, cool things and see what sticks really. And but in a safe way. So yeah, it's really
Friends, if you recall in December, I interviewed Tuesday Chambers, and Tuesday talked about how her student aides gave her a great deal of guidance when it came to the things that the students would respond to positively, and letting your students have that kind of input when it comes to your programming is. It clearly resonates because you're building your relationships with your students, and unlike their classroom teachers and their subject teachers who they see sporadically, the continuity in the library is that you're there, and you're that constant presence for them to build those relationships. I love it. You're an author. You're an author of a book. Your book is called Podcasting with Youth. And friends, I've included a link in our show notes. And, Lucas, I think this is a great, I want you to speak a little bit about your book because I love your subtitle more than anything, because the subtitle is A Quick Guide for Librarians and Educators. And, the fact is you put those librarians ahead because, and I selfishly, I really would like to know, in your opinion, when it comes to podcasting with students, what is it about librarians do you feel puts us in a position to podcast with our students in a way that is unique, say different from other educators in the classroom?
Well, I just view it as the library is the space that anybody is welcome. Everyone is welcome in. I mean, I'm not saying that they are in other places, but it's unique in that we're interacting with the students in a much different way than, like we talked about, like subject teachers, because they have to, and it's no fault of theirs or anything. It's just they have a certain amount of work that they need to accomplish with that student in a specific time. The library is there as a safe haven for anyone who wants to relax, read for pleasure, or try something new. And that's what the podcast is also done, and different programs like our Manga Club and the Open Mic has brought new people to the library that maybe viewed the library in a different way in the past, a traditional way. And that's kind of been my goal from day one as well. So it just provides us with this kind of unique space that allows them to explore and especially make mistakes. So our makerspace is another example of that. But and I mentioned that in that guide that I wrote, that making mistakes is, and it doesn't need to, I didn't care from day one if it was perfect. So there are episodes early on, I am 100% sure, where before I learned how to edit, or before I was, some of the students have helped me edit and they're probably better than I am. But there are episodes where you've got, the photocopier going. I know the fire alarm went off with Sophie Cameron's interview, but we did edit that out. But it had this kind of like punk rock garage feel to it, and I liked that. I thought it was cool. It was a little rough around the edges, and the kids were starting to get their feet, and I was just letting them go. And I think that the time to do that is unique to libraries and librarians, to give them the time and the space to fail and to figure out that it's absolutely fine to fail.
Well, and I want to make a little connection with that, because it is for our students to see us, I don't want to say struggle, but it is watching your teacher or your school librarian work through a challenge is how we model, it's about teaching grit and resilience. And I read Angela Duckworth's book about grit. And, we have to give our students a place to fail safely, and to learn that they need to work through these challenges rather than give up. And if they're watching you as you learn on the spot how to put together a student-led podcast, and you are sort of you are their, sponsors for this organization, I think when students recognize that adults learn in much the same way they do, and trial and error is big, and grit and resilience, the kids need to see that, we get, stymied as well.
Well, I'll try to be quick on this story, but there was a perfect example of that. I got invited to a conference in Manchester. I won't say any names. It's not really negative. It wasn't really anybody's fault. It was just a miscommunication. But the premise was, come up to this conference. It was full of authors, this conference. And it was a library-based conference. But what was unique about it was I reached out to the guy and I said, look, if I brought 4 of my podcast students up and just let them kind of loose, could we just interview authors? He goes, I've got one better for you. And he gave me this name. I won't say it, but it's a huge author here in the UK. And the kids went absolutely wild when we found out that she was going to be there. So we got on a train in London very early in the morning I don't know what day it was now. It actually might have been a Saturday. And we went up there, me and my library colleague and 4 student park with our little bag of equipment, and got up there and met the organizer. And of course, they were just chomping at the bit. Can we? First strike was it was very clear that we had nowhere to set up our equipment, and so my colleague ran down to the library lobby and said, "Can we please have somewhere?" And they gave us a beautiful kind of conference room. Second strike was I saw the author in question, and we approached her, and she had absolutely no clue who I was or what I was talking about, even though I was told that this was all set and go. And she was not happy, but we came around once I was able to explain it to her. And we had an amazing interview. And not only that, put me in contact with all these other authors. And we ended up getting like 6 interviews out of that, out of that day. And it was a long day, but a really cool day. And the kids absolutely loved it. But there was a few minutes there of internal panic for sure, where, it was clear that, they didn't know what was going on. But we kind of ambushed them with a little mic, a little handy recorder. But anyway.
Well, I do appreciate that being put on the spot like that. And, I think that every librarian listening can identify when something they had so carefully and so thoughtfully, and we tend to overthink, and we're planners and these, type A personality librarians who have all their ducks in a row, and we're ready and we're planful and we're very intentional in what we do. And if it falls apart, you start to look at yourself and say, what did I do wrong? And you're like, nope, sometimes it just doesn't work out. So, but again, your students seeing how you piece this together and salvage it is really terrific. And to recognize those opportunities for what they're worth. I mean, it's wonderful. I do want to first of all, friends, I will put links in the show notes to the Booklings podcast and to Lucas's book that you can get on Amazon. And especially if you're interested in creating a podcasting club in your library, it's really a great place to get started with those ideas of yours. I was excited. And another thing we'll put in the show notes is Lucas's website, his blog, because you have library lessons in your library blog. All of these links are in the show notes, friends. Lucas, was there an aha moment when you realized that you needed to include lessons on fake news in your library programming for your students?
There definitely was. And I'm trying to remember, I can't remember the year, but there was, it was before a certain person took office in the U.S., but, which I won't mention, but it was before that. And there were these 3 students, and they were library regulars, and just always, just in there all the time, and great kids who used it all the time. And I considered them pretty well read. And just by talking to them, I would have assumed that they were, on top of the news and things like that. And then one morning, they came into the library, and they were just, almost frantic. And there had been this very short craze here. I know it happened in Canada too, because I saw it on my Facebook feed of my friends back in Canada, of this killer clown frenzy that was very short-lived, but it was on social media for, I don't know if you remember that, yeah. And they came into the library and they said that clowns the night before had killed 30 people in Canada, and they wanted my take on it. Like I was some sort of Canadian representative, that I was going to have some sort of thing. And I said, no, that didn't happen. And I couldn't convince them. So I was like, okay, let's go to the computer. And I was showing them, and I was like, this is a big problem. And it wasn't long after that, I was able to show them kind of like, this stuff, you need to trace it back. Here's the story that shows that this stuff was kind of being blown out of proportion, and it was just people dressing. I don't know if there was ever any real crimes committed, but not long after that, a certain individual was going into trying to become leader of the free world, and then it really amped up. And I decided to partner with the kind of like the IT guys. And I said, this is a big problem. And these kids need to understand that, I just thought in the school, I know they are doing it in the IT lessons, but I said, I really just, because of my own, kind of frustration with it, to see it on Twitter and things like that and get angry at it, which I shouldn't do, but you do get angry when you see this garbage being spread around. I said, I just want to incorporate it. So I was able to get it on their certain information put on their homework pages, and it incorporated into their homework to do responsible researching. And I said, I'm just going to do it in the library lessons. And I really just started by, I'd have 30 kids in a classroom, in the library, I should say, which doubles it's got enough tables. I've got 5 kids at each table, at 6 groups of tables, 5 kids. I gave each table a news story that had been published, and one of them was true. And they just had to read them in full, discuss, and figure out which one was true. And it ended up being like they were pretty harmless ones for them, but they ended up being really funny. Like there was one, man gets fired, he dumps 300,000, wins lottery, dumps 300,000 pounds of manure on his boss's lawn, and they, that was the one that got voted. That's got to be true, and stuff like that. But it was a good exercise, and these are the things you need to look for in a story. These are the things that they're trying, how they trick you, and that's how it really started. And then it kind of just amped up from there, where I started to make real, like quote unquote, real lessons on it. But yeah.
I'm very curious because you're teaching in the UK. I question whether or not you would have ever been challenged on the decision to use an example in the news cycle about the current president of the United States, whereas an American, U.S. School librarians and educators, using our president as an example of something of what not to do when it comes to fake news, et cetera, is verboten. I mean, we really, you cannot use your own president as an example. But if you're in the UK, would you have felt a little more safe in using examples, because there's a good chance you're not going to be offending anybody's family?
Absolutely. That's the one thing I noticed, because I worked for 5 years in the public library in Canada. Even in Canada, I saw the kind of I saw books being challenged and things like that. The public library system that I worked at was awesome, and they didn't put up with any of that. Knock on wood. I've never been challenged at all on that. And what's interesting is that I ran a banned books week thing during banned books week, and even the teachers, when I first did it, were like, "What do you mean?" Like, this happens in the U.S. They pull Captain Underpants and they pull Where's Waldo and stuff like that. And no, they don't. No, they do. Here's the website. This is the information. They couldn't believe it. I've never ever been. I'll say this, and next week I'll get a letter. Why do you have now? It's just my luck. But no, what have I been there? I was almost, 8 years now, never been challenged once. And yeah, I mean, it's just been, I think here, I think there is a certain detachment, like we talked about off air, a little detachment to U.S. politics, of course, amongst the children. I mean, it is heavy here with adults, but yeah, I do feel, I guess, safer. I never ran those types of things in the public library in Canada, so I don't know. I did invite a guy in Canada who was talking about, he was doing a science lesson, and that I had a big group of people watching it, and he was talking about the Big Bang, and a family stood up in the back and protested it and just said, "This is garbage," and blah, blah, blah. That surprised me. But he handled it well. He handled it better than I was, because I was quite young then, and I was like, what? But I don't know. You have to let people have their say, but to interrupt things. But it was a bit odd. But anyway, no, to answer your question, I've never felt concerned about that, to mention him. And I don't focus everything on him, but he always comes up with the students. He always comes up. If I say, what do you think of when you think the term? This is how I open the lesson. What do you guys think of when you hear the term fake news? It's always him. First, without a doubt.
Well, and friends, I have included some links in the show notes which are not directly related to our guest today, because I might have mentioned this on the podcast recently, but I listened to BBC's Trending podcast, and it's about all things social media. And the United States is never lacking for fodder when it comes to the BBC's Trending podcast, because whatever we are doing on social media, there's going to be an example that they can then use. And it's a great podcast because it talks about things that we should be aware of happening in social media. And to be fair, as somebody who teaches in the primary schools, the elementary, I need to obviously take everything I use and make it very G-rated for our littles. But, being having our students be aware of what we need to question when we are consuming this information on our social media diet. I know there are plenty of adults who needed these lessons years ago because they aren't digital natives. So, friends, there are a couple, I put some links in the show notes to the BBC trending page because they do address this issue. It's worth mentioning right now that the term fake news has a different meaning than how it's been used recently by politicians in the United States to refer to news they don't like. Am I correct that your lessons that you teach your students are on fake news, that on how information online can be manipulated and manufactured?
Absolutely, because here in the UK, luckily, we don't have politicians in power who use it to attack the media who are just trying to tell a story. But unfortunately, fortunately, I should say for us. So I do use that term, and I always preface it with, I hate this term, but I also call it misinformation. But that kind of, sometimes I see their eyes gloss over when I say that. So that term does have a punch with them. And they don't, because I'm trying to get them to think about it. They aren't considering in their minds, I know they're not thinking, he's talking about the London Times, you know what I mean? Or whatever. He's not thinking that. I'm pretty sure anyway, because when I ask them, when I gauge it, I do like little surveys with them too on this other lesson on it I used to run, where I get to kind of like, I ask them a question and then I get to see their answers kind of live on a screen. It's a cool program called Nearpod. And they always say that the term means, something someone's put out there to make me believe, to pay money, or it's usually about them getting tricked. But most of them like tricked into paying money, but a lot of them will say, I would say the majority of them will say, it's funny memes, or it's funny memes. And yes, it is that, but it's also this. It's also immigrants are taking all your jobs away and things like that, which was a big one here with Brexit. And I just had to, constantly use that, and hopefully it got through. But yeah, so yes, sorry, I am rambling again, but the fake news for me and for the UK primarily isn't an attack on well-established newspaper organizations.
Okay. I am curious because do your students ever ask why you are teaching them about fighting fake news? Because when I teach my digital citizenship lessons, they ask me all the time. They're like, why are we learning? This is library, Mrs. Herman. Why are we learning about this here?
I have had that, and I get a few, we've done something like this in our IT lessons. I said, yes, but we're going to do this one. And I know I have a kind of a separate thing, and what I always tell them is that you're in a place surrounded by information. There's our nonfiction section over there. And I always do like a little nonfiction scavenger hunt with them as well at the beginning of the year to get them, here's how to use a nonfiction book, a glossary, an appendix, whatever. And, so they are aware of that. So I say this is a place where it doesn't matter if you're in the library or where, but you use these computers every single day, and you're getting information from them. Especially if you're coming in here after school, before school, and you're just kind of waiting for the bell to go. You are absorbing information, and I want to make sure that you know how to filter out the garbage. So that's kind of what I say.
No, I think that's great. I will say, friends, over the years, it's been something of a hobby of mine. I've accumulated a lot of fake websites, and I know school librarians rely on these heavily to teach digital citizenship and to teach our students to have this skepticism about things that they see on the internet. And many of these fake websites are a little too adult for my younger students. But, there is a lot of garbage on the internet, and some of it is just created in jest, and it's not meant to separate you from your money, like some of the hoax websites that spring up after a catastrophe or a natural disaster. And those examples are out there as well. But I will include links to those fake websites. And I also, another thing that I happen to use just because I have younger students is the sort of the YouTube April Fools. on April Fool's Day, there are invariably a lot of hoaxes on sort of April Fool's jokes on YouTube. I can't use the ones on Instagram because they're oftentimes a little too adult in nature. But there is no shortage of some sort of hoax-like YouTube channels, or YouTube videos, which you can also access on this link I'm going to include for you.
That's good.
I'm curious because you mentioned the age of the students that you're teaching. They are digital natives, and they've been online for years before they've met you. So how do you address the fact that your students have already, in some respects, created a digital footprint out there already? My students are 5, 6, and 7 years old. So in many ways, I can sort of intercept some of this. And we talk about, before you make these mistakes, let's talk about some of the things that you might regret. But
yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. I always start the series with a lesson that is with year 7. So they're 11 years old. And I say, look, if somebody... how do I phrase it? If somebody Googled you today, what would they know? And then this isn't my idea. I'm sure I stole it from somewhere. And if someone Googled you 10 years from now, what do you want them to see? So, because I said, I'll guarantee it, when you go to find a job, they're Googling you. So, or if you go to apply to a place, they might start Googling your name. So what do you want them to see? What would they see now? And what do you want them to see? And it's always very positive stuff, but I think that kind of plants the seed. I hope it does. And some of them and then I do show them examples. But I have to, again, like you said, you have to show them examples that are, content safe, but of people who have, unfortunately, there's a great book out there I don't know how well known he is in the US, but he's done some really good US kind of content. His name is John Ronson, and he wrote a book called So You've Been Publicly Shamed. And he does cover a few examples of this where people have tweeted or put stuff out on social media and not only lost their careers, but have kind of had to, in some cases, change their names and move different places in the world. So he's an amazing guy to kind of read. But so I show them examples that are content safe with that as well. And it's just, I guess, to try to kind of plant that seed, really, if it hasn't been already, because like you said, you're teaching them at a younger age, and I'm getting them where they've already been on for quite a few years. So it's tricky.
Yeah, one of the things, friends, I'll include links in the show notes to this book that was referenced, and again, many of those examples are not appropriate for our students. And it's so hard because they're so compelling. These are such, and we've had some students post some terrible things on social media. And, what is worth mentioning is, reminding them who else is on social media. Your principal is on social media. Your teachers are on social media. Your family members are on social media. And, again, going back to this idea, if I searched you on social media on Google, would you want me to see what you've posted? Because and that is something which, the example I use is students who might jeopardize scholarships for college or university. If somebody were to Google something and see something embarrassing you did, maybe, and there every year there are cases in which Ivy League schools have denied applications almost retroactively. They've initially accepted students. Students have behaved horribly on social media and then had those invitations to those Ivy League schools rescinded. I'm speaking specifically of the one to Harvard, and they lost almost 10 students before the school year even started because of hateful messaging they posted on social media. And again, my students aren't applying to the university anytime soon, but putting that in their heads, that this could affect a job application, or, by the way, what your teachers think of you. Because when that kind of information gets forwarded on to future teachers, they might decide very quickly how they feel about you based on things that you have posted on social media. And so that is something that I've pointed to sometimes are the scholarships that might be in jeopardy, your relationships with your future teachers, because this does follow you. It follows you for years. So absolutely. we've spoken a little bit about this, but, most students think that they're pretty smart, and I'm sure yours are no exception. We've talked a little bit about strategies which are very effective for convincing students of why being aware of fake news is so important. And I think what I hear from you is that you've used examples that hit home with them. You're going to use things that they can connect with immediately.
Yeah.
Have you thought of ways, can you share with us how, you've been able to remind them about this importance of being aware of fake news and why it's so critical?
It's just before we kind of went into this lockdown, I did a whole run on the virus. Because it's ever present, of course, and there were some pretty terrible things happening here where people were burning the 5G masts in the north of the country. I think 26 of them were burned down, and because they thought Wi-Fi was causing it. So that was an easy one, really. And there was also, Fox News. I don't know if they're the affiliate here was saying that it was asking the question, do mosquitoes spread it, and things like that. And that was just a headline. Just to get you to click on the links, which I found, which was interesting. And of course, the whole thing that has been grown in a lab, and it's a militarized weapon and things like that. So they do seem I think they're more savvy than we give them credit for. But I did this kind of generic quiz, and I gave it to about 400 students, ages 11 to 13, with a few older ones in there. And average kind of 20 questions, all with like, here's a real, here's a news story or a headline that I didn't create, that has actually been made by somebody. You have to read it and read the little article and determine if you think it's real or not. And average, it was a 64%, average, which is not amazing in my opinion. It's not terrible. It could have been way worse, but there's still a lot on there that they're getting kind of tricked by. And so they're getting, I think what's the problem is that we have such a fragmented media landscape where you're getting everything, these little bits and bytes from every direction. They're getting bombarded if they are looking at the news, and they do look at the news, because I always ask them and they say, I do look on my phone app, or it's usually an app, or sometimes, which surprises me, the radio in the morning before school, but mainly websites. So they are getting all this stuff, but they're getting it quick, and they might read a headline and then jump to a conclusion, which that's what they want you to do, because they want you to click on the link. So I also talk about the importance of understanding that they're getting ad revenue, what ad revenue is, that they're getting money from this stuff. So those are the ones that kind of, in my opinion, hit home, because it's everywhere, of course. And I just feel like they need to know. And again, like, I wasn't worried about doing it. I don't know if other people would be worried that they would get complaints or anything like that, but no complaints from anyone. It was fine.
So I have just a couple follow-ups. First of all, I like that you mentioned ads, because that's how I tie in when we teach our responsible researching, when we teach our students about the value of databases, because you don't have ads, and you don't have your search. The results of your search isn't dictated by how much money is being paid to pop up at the top of your search, as opposed to, on the third or fourth page. So I think as school librarians, the very empowering thing about that is, because there are ads, we can then turn around and talk about how important databases are, because the databases are going to be ad-free. And we're very appreciative of that. You don't have to wade through the advertisements. You don't have to come in with that sort of skepticism. And hopefully with the databases, you don't have to be concerned about bias. I love also, you mentioned clickbait. And clickbait has recently come up in my digital citizenship lessons. And I've just flat out asked, do you know what clickbait is? And in this case, these are 9 and 10-year-olds, and hearing what they have to say. And it's very hard, again, using actual clickbait on the internet is a very dicey, and you're sort of treading with trepidation, because I don't want to accidentally broadcast on my smartboard something that is, incredibly inappropriate, because it will get through the firewall at school. I'm sure of it. The day I decide to click on clickbait, it will be ridiculously inappropriate, and there will be consequences. But do you see clickbait as something that we need to address in these lessons? Because all too often you're being lured away it's oftentimes just a commercial venture. It's advertising, but you're oftentimes, going off in left field with the clickbait.
What I do to kind of get around that, because you're exactly right, I don't even touch the actual websites for that. I made my own, and what I do is I say, here are the tools that you can make, or here are the tools that you can use to identify this stuff. So I made my own, which was very kind of, it's always a hot topic with our kids, that, so the headline, and it was like an actual article, but it had like a clicky bait thing on it, which was that the Prime Minister has announced that he's going to ban school uniforms. They can wear what they want, which is what they always want. Every student seems to want to do that, even though maybe they secretly don't care, but they all claim they do. They hate their uniforms. But anyway, so I made my own, but I put that kind of language in, the emotional language, all caps. You won't believe this. You won't believe what the Prime Minister said. And I have in the article itself a few spelling errors and things like that. So I ended up kind of making my own up. I did a few of those, but the one with the uniform one is, I did it like I laminated it, and they had to take a marker, like a whiteboard marker, and just circle the things that were red flags. And I actually printed it out. I didn't actually make a website, which it would have been much more techie, but and probably more fun for them. But they seem to enjoy getting these things and reading, and put them in little groups and discuss. But yeah, and then I did that. I've been doing that online a little bit as well with the virtual lessons. But yes, I think it's something you definitely need to address, because that's the hook that draws them in. And I was pleasantly surprised that a lot of them realized that it's all about money. There's a few that say it's to shock you, and I said yes, but that is secondary to getting the money, to making you click, because that's really all it's about. So that's how I got around it. I made my own, but it's definitely important.
Lucas, you're fantastic for sharing all this. I am going to just boldly ask, would you mind sharing that 20-question assessment which you shared with your students? Could you share with us in the podcast? All right. So, friends, we will ask Lucas to share with us the 20 questions which he shared with his students. And friends, I do remember going to an ed tech conference before, pre-pandemic, and hearing about how we could manipulate headlines digitally online to manufacture sort of a fake web page interface that looks very legit. And I'm, of course, blanking out right now. I will say, especially in the United States, a very popular resource for school librarians when it comes to digital citizenship and learning about things like fake news and is Common Sense Education, or Common Sense Media is the website that we use. As I mentioned, the BBC Trending podcast gives me lots of ways to stay up on issues of social media. Lucas, are there resources which you, in your lesson development, have found useful, or are you just sort of coming up with this as you go along?
No, definitely not. I use I think it's a UK-based one called Full Fact, FULLFACT, and that it takes really current news stories and kind of breaks them down. On the column on the left is the story, and the column on the right is breaking down the truth of it or the claims around it. I use that a lot, and I actually show them. I talk to them about Snopes, which is sometimes. Weirdly enough, it gets kind of blocked on our filters, but because I made it on there, but I just cherry pick things because you can debunk some cool urban myths on Snopes and things like that. And I have a book that I use, and it's just called Fact or Fiction. I can't think of the author's name at all, but it's got a great, cool looking kind of snazzy cover, and I use that. And I also use, the BBC. and I wish I could tell you the kind of journalist's name. There's a small handful of journalists who are misinformation kind of quote unquote experts, but they are really good. I can't remember the name. It's like a section of the BBC. It's called BBC something, and they have tons of cool stuff. That's where I stole the idea of the clickbaity thing. I just made my own. They had one, but it was kind of aimed at younger kids, and I just tweaked it. And they have tons of cool resources on there, so I use those. And I use Politico and things like that if it's coming to like especially US stuff that we need to go for. But Common Sense Media is really good as well. But I do, like with the quiz that I did, I just took tweets and things that the BBC found on WhatsApp, and of course content. There's a lot of it. Like there was a Facebook post about this dog food brand will kill your dog and things like that. And you have to read it through because there's all those red flags that I talked about in the earlier lesson. That's the point of it. Like, are you remembering kind of ingesting this information that I've talked to you about? That these things are red flags, breaking news with 10 exclamation points should be a clue that might not be a true story. But so I use those types of websites. The BBC has been a really good resource for me actually for that as well.
All right, friends, I appreciate, yes, anytime something tugs at your heartstrings or infuriates you, it's probably trying to manipulate what you're thinking. And the book, and many of you are nodding your heads because you have this in your personal collection, is a book written by Jennifer Lagarde and Darren Hudgens, Fact versus Fiction, Teaching Critical Thinking Skills in the Age of Fake News. Thank you so much. Yes, and I agree. So I'll put a link, friends, in the show notes as well to the resources that Lucas has just mentioned. So I do. I always want to make sure that listeners have something to follow up on. Lucas, this has been fantastic. I'm so grateful that we were able to have this conversation. Would you please, my listeners love to add guests to their PLN. Would you let us know how we can follow you on social media?
Yeah, I mean, Twitter's the best way, I guess. I'm at Lucas, Lucas J Maxwell, Maxwell, and that's the best way. I mean, I do have an Instagram account, but it's Glenthorne_library, and it's a lot of books. It's a lot of books on there. So if you like to look at pictures of books, Twitter's where I'm sharing like these types of resources. I'm always looking for new educators, librarians, teachers to interact with, to share stuff. So yeah, please do.
Wonderful. And friends, just in case you're dying to know, 500 pounds sterling translates to $678 on the current exchange. So yes, $678. That I'll tell you is a lovely chunk of money for buying your equipment for any podcast setup. And for somebody who found the cheapest way to do this, I can tell you, can guarantee you, I've set mine up with far less money. So,
as I say in the guide, you definitely don't need that much. You definitely don't need that much to start a podcast.
Lucas, yeah. It's been an absolute pleasure. I wish you the best in your current lockdown, and I hope our paths cross sometime in the future.
I really appreciate you having me, Amy. Take care. Thanks so much.
I do really appreciate Lucas Maxwell being able to join us today for this important conversation on fighting fake news. I also appreciate all of his perspectives on how he incorporates Skype and podcasting into his library programming. We are incredibly lucky to have such generous guests who come onto the show and who share all of these resources which they have compiled over the years. And this episode is no exception. Please make sure to check out all of Lucas's resources for fighting fake news in our show notes, as well as other links that we have included in our conversation. And on a related note, I did record episode 92 this past fall with Melissa Tom and Jackie Whiting on media literacy essentials. And there are many sort of parallels and overlapping concepts when it comes to fighting fake news and media literacy. I also wanted to include a link to free online resources for lessons from Thinkalong. And I will quote the FAQ page. Thinkalong is a learning tool designed for middle school students to build critical thinking, media literacy, and debate skills. Thinkalong asks students to put social issues under a microscope by evaluating resources, considering multiple sides of an argument, and engaging in respectful dialogue. So while they are not sponsors to the show, I do find that anytime an organization would like to put together some excellent and free resources for students we serve, I'm greatly appreciative. If you found today's episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. And if you really like listening today, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. The topic of our next episode will be broadcasting from the library and my interview with Dustin McConnell. I hope you will tune in.